Okay, Archive 2, Symbols of the Godhead upon the Earth. Hold on, let me get my light. Yeah. Arcane Images of the Divine Pillar. The Great Pyramid's identity as the altar of God in the land of Egypt, built for the redemption of a lost humanity by architects before the flood, is evident from so many corroborating accounts. But the numerous references to the pyramid complex being a pillar from so diverse sources requires an intense scrutiny into the mindset of belief systems no longer extant today. In order to understand the pyramid's origin, function, and future purpose, we must first comprehend how certain images became attached to it. The ancient widely held that an immense pillar was fixed at the middle of the earth. It served as an earthly marker to the border of the Lord and was God's earthly witness to the world of his promises made to the first men concerning humanity's terrestrial death and future resurrection, an event that will only occur only once this planet is sanctified at this altar. This monument, according to the prophet Isaiah, was a sign located in Egypt. Amazingly, the prophet Jeremiah also confirms this indirectly, writing that the Lord has set signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, even unto this day. 1. Evidently, the 8th and 7th century BC Hebrews were aware of the Giza monuments and their connection to God. An Egyptian text that may refer to them also was cited in Davidson's epic work entitled The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, on page 371, which reads, The God of the universe is the light above the firmament, and his symbols are upon the earth. The word pyramid is of rather late construction and was not used in distant antiquity in referring to the Giza monuments. Pyramids were originally called pillars before and after the Great Flood for reasons that can only be explained by careful analysis of the truly fundamental characteristics of the pillar as a necessary item of architecture. In 1939, an antiquarian named Robert B. Stacy Judd wrote that in Seeking the origin of the stone column pillar, we learned that its prototype was a wooden member such as a trunk, stock of a tree. 2. And such was the development of all primitive cultures to build with the wood of trees before acquiring the skill of masonry to erect pillars of stone. To early man, the tree itself was a symbol of profound mystery and vertical bridge between heaven and earth and the underworld. Its boughs and branches high in the air typified the heavens and sky, but these were attached to a support, the stock or trunk of the tree, which was firmly placed on the ground, burrowing deep with roots stretching into the underworld. The pillars of temples long ago represented the trees of sacred groves. Long prior to Muhammad in Arabia, the pillar in the tent at the oasis or sanctuary served to identify the holy tree. 4. The pillar, even anciently, was the continuation of the symbolism of the mysterious tree. Though the majestic stone pillars erected by the Sethites over 48 centuries ago were one thing, esoterically they were something else. This is best explained in the Hebrew word for pillar, which is matzbeth. I can't say it. Matzabeth, meaning monumental stone, something stationed, while also meaning stock of a tree, pillar. This word is akin to matzbah, memorial stone, pillar, or mazabah, a stone erected to be a marker. 5. There are some authorities that even assert that the Hebrew words here mean architectural structure. 6. Not much has changed in that part of the world. Even the Egyptologists term the oldest stone structures related to the pyramids as mastabas, a word derived directly from the old Semitic words for pillar. Mastabas are box-shaped buildings that serve as lids over the top of well mouths. 7. Roughly pyramidal in shape. Here we delve yet deeper into the layers of symbolism. Those peoples living before the Great Flood cataclysm were very aware of the prophecies widely spread concerning the Diluvian disaster. Because it was thought that the world would be flooded from waters issuing forth from the underworld, early man maintained the custom of keeping massive stone lids atop wells to prevent the flood. So profound a fear was this belief of waters from below that even after the Great Deluge, the tradition was renewed and practiced. 8. Even in the oldest book of the Holy Writ, the book of Job, we read, "The waters are hid as with a stone." 9. It cannot be left unmentioned here that far below 10, the Great Pyramid is a well of uncertain depth, now filled with rubble. The monument was not constructed over it casually, but the entire architectural passage system descends directly to the underground chamber where the well is located. The two largest pyramids at Giza are indeed the two pillars of the Sethites, a fact seemingly remembered by the Sumerians. This incredibly advanced and archaic civilization maintained clearly in their records that their history was divided between time periods both before and after the flood. Their memories of the erection of the colossal pillars may be reflected in their term for twins, which ultimately mirrors the old Semitic words for words just examined, mashtaba. 11. From the remotest times, the pillar was used to identify something upon the earth, but they served also a dual function. They supported ceilings as architectural pieces while also displaying artwork, precious objects, and idols. But the most common use of the pillar long ago was the preservation and conveyance of messages. Pillars were covered in writings and pictures that gave elaborate testimonies concerning history's conquests, the reigns and deeds of kings, laws of the land, and they were frequently used to mark boundaries, while they were ornately covered with the inscriptions that affirmed land ownership and deed transactions. In essence, pillars have always been used to display knowledge. In the second millennium BC, Near East property was marked by pillars with inscriptions and sometimes pictorial representations. In Hebrew, the word gabul, usually translated as landmark, actually means border or boundary. The erection of a pillar to mark someone's boundary was long regarded as divine law. Even the biblical book of Proverbs reads, "Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set." 12. According to the authors of ancient symbol worship, the pillar was used to consecrate a special geographical place. 13. The Sumerian king list was inscribed upon stone columns and pillars called prisms, records of rock concerning the cities, kings, their reigns, and other particulars of interest both before and after the flood, as well as the various sages that served them. The most famous one is preserved in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, England. 14. One of the greatest historical centers of learning and knowledge in the world was at Egypt under the Macedonian regents at Alexandria. The renowned library there housed replicas, translations, and copies of texts from pillars taken from all over the Greek-touched world. Epigenes recorded that the Babylonians made records of celestial observances dating back to archaic time carved into pillars. 15. A practice they learned from their Sumerian predecessors. Moses of Corian wrote that a book had been discovered at Nineveh in Assyria, which was translated from the Chaldaic into Greek by order of Alexander the Great, which contained historical records of the distant past, histories that were found engraved upon a pillar. 16. Archaeologists excavating Babylonia from under the arid desert wastes have uncovered a memorial stone at Merodach, Baladan the First, 1320 BC, that calls upon the infernal deities. All the gods on this stone tablet, whose emblems are seen, violently to destroy the name of he who moves this boundary stone. Among the emblems upon this stone is that of a winged dragon. 17. Remember this discovery, for it is a window into the ancient mindset. To destroy one's name was to completely end the one who retained it. A person was his name. The connection between memorial stones and dragons is one that will be seen as this study continues. The two pillars of the Sethites were built after Enoch received the divine instructions that he had passed to his relatives before his departure. There are many who believe, and with good reason, that the references to two pillars has a more important meaning. It is held that there may have been two entirely different architectural complexes having pyramids that were by the Sethites, and that the Great Pyramid complex in Egypt is only one of them. We recall the traditions that one pillar was to remain for 1,000 years until the flood, which would destroy or bury this architectural relic, and the other was to survive the violence of the diluvian cataclysm and to be an enduring sign and witness to future generations that the world would be destroyed again by fire, a flood of fire. Bearing these things in mind, we shall now examine the enigmatic etymology of the word pyramid. In the Old Testament books, the Hebrew word for pillar most commonly used was amud, 18. This is akin to the Arabic imad, which means both column and pillar. It was the Greeks who first merged this older Semitic word with their own root word for fire to create the word pyramid, 19. The Greek root per is an old root for which other modern words developed, such as purge, pure, purity, purify, and impure. It is a word simply meaning fire, 20. The Platonists likened the symbol of the pyramid as their symbol for the element of fire, 21. The symbol has been recognized as the universe. I don't have to fucking say it. The symbol has been recognized as the universal image of fire in ancient India and the nations of the Near East, and even in more contemporary times, occultists and witches employ the symbol in their representation of fire, 22. The Greeks considered the pyramids to be pillars of fire. In the Old Text, divine Pymander, Hermes asserts that fire was the chief medium by which the Creator made the world. He reasons that flames are in the shape of a pyramid because of the way they burn, the flame tips pointing upward, forming points, 23. The Hebrew writings tell us that before Solomon's temple stood two pillars called Boaz and Jachin. The biblical meanings of these two titles are he shall establish and in its strength, 24. But these are esoteric interpretations, for the actual translations of Boaz and Jachin are different. Hold on. But these are esoteric interpretations, for the actual translations of Boaz and Jachin are different, perhaps remnants of the forgotten phonetics of an elder speech already extinct as a mode of communication by the days of David and Solomon. Boaz is constructed from roots meaning haste, motion, bow, and fire, az, while Jachin derives from jarak, a root for moon, the sun and moon. Masons have long held that these two pillars withheld a great deal of secret knowledge. 26. These pillars were a mystical reminder that the sun and moon, as computers for time, were designed as signs for the constant observances of men. The use of twin pillars representing mysteries of the deity was also discovered at the ancient temple of Hercules at Tyre in Phoenicia, where one stele was in the form of a pillar and the other as an obelisk. 27. There is little difference. The obelisk is a unification of the pyramid and pillar, being four-sided like a pyramid, but elongated like a pillar. At its base is a foundation stone, and its summit bears a miniature pyramid. Most often, upon obelisks, the pillar surface is covered with hieroglyphic records and inscriptions. Over 200 years ago, the mystic Francis Barrett wrote that the ancients were willing to deliver great mysteries in sacred letters and explain them in certain symbolical figures, pyramids and obelisks, to the fire. Harold Bailey, in his exhaustive work Lost Language of Symbolism, 1912, wrote that the pillar symbol represented the gateway to eternity, 29. The author of Nature Worship, 1929, identifies the obelisk as a shrunken, vertically thin pyramid that seems to embody a secret that was ancientest among the ancients, 30. We do not think in terms of words and phrases. The activity of the human mind thinks in images and pictures. Early sages recognized this and naturally employed the usage of familiar symbols to represent the images that they knew and conveyed. The scribal art made it easy for a writer to conceal his subject matter beneath a veil of normal images while also delivering deep truths to those who understand the dual application of the imagery. Symbols are thought fossils, enabling the masterful scribes of old to weave arcane things under modern guises. Porphyry wrote that the ancients were willing to conceal God and divine virtues by sensible figures and by those things which are visible, yet signifying invisible things. 31. The invisible things were those of the spirit, which to the initiates were the only things that were actually real. Everything on earth known to men were only copies, reflections of something spiritual. Stobaeus in the 5th century AD cited Hermes as saying, all things then, those upon the earth, are not truth, but imitations of the truth. 32. The use of the word pillar for pyramid is no exception. The ideas attached to the image of the pillar are very old and embody a forgotten theology lost to the modern world that requires a delving into the oldest writing on earth to remember. Not even is mankind exempt from being a mere imitation of something greater? The Holy Writ declares that we are made in the image of God and after his likenesses, but the physical world is only a reflection of the inner belief systems mankind holds as true, and for this reason God is viewed as black to Ethiopians, as Asians to Orientals, or white to the Occident. On one of the images by which early man depicted or imagined God was as the sun, for it provided humanity all the things needed to live comfortably on earth. Diodorus Siculus wrote that they adored the sun as expressing the likeness of the deity. 33. The sun was a constant daily reminder of the presence of the Creator as it emerged to begin another day. Not only the sun, but the planets too were regarded in like fashion. The Greeks watched the heavens religiously and claimed that the regularity of the passage of the planets and the stars in their cycles, orbits beginning ever where they end, was a modular image of eternity. 34. And considering that our study involves a monument of God in the land of Egypt at Giza, it is a profound thing to realize that in the text called Hermetica, we find that Egypt is an image of heaven. All the operations and the powers which rule and work in heaven have been transferred to the earth below. 35. Francis Barrett was a researcher of old occult studies and writings over 200 years ago. In his work called The Magus, a complete system of occult philosophy, he wrote, the wisest ancients knew that in nature the greatest secrets lay hidden, but as in these later days men gave themselves almost wholly up to vice and luxury, so that their misunderstandings have become more and more depraved, till being swallowed up in the gross senses, they became totally unfit for divine contemplations and deep speculations in nature. 36. God, in his infinite wisdom, designed the mundane mechanics of our world we all take for granted as similitudes and images of far more important spiritual truths. The sun sets, bringing the dark as the world is immersed in shadow, presaging death and ruin, but the moon, as a lesser light, provides an unspoken hope of a greater light to come, another day. Then the sun emerges and vanquishes the darkness, foreshadowing the hope of resurrection. For this reason was Christ titled the Sun of Righteousness. 37. Even our planet's history serves as merely a type. Mankind was made from the elements of the earth, and this old world, because of the rebellion of humanity, was destroyed and made over by the violence of the great flood, which resulted in the birth of a new world where men could start over, just as the sinner's total immersion under the water of baptism symbolized symbolize their new beginning and walk with God. In the future, the world will be made to burn in terrestrial fires caused by a celestial cataclysm, just as the people of earth will pass through divine fires of the Spirit. And it was for this purpose that Enoch was given divine instructions to have a pillar of fire, pyramid, built on the earth to warn future generations of the apocalyptic fires that will destroy the world by the very element by which he had created it. A common denominator between the widely divergent pyramid traditions discussed throughout this book is that they were covered in the inscriptions of the knowledge of the pre-flood world in an effort to preserve this information for people after the deluge. These writings concerned the past, the present, histories of those days and future. This alludes that the information was of divine origin, for it is by inspiration that one can know the future. Like the pyramids, the oldest writings in the world have all been found on stone. Stone is a symbol of permanence, 38, and it was used for the inscriptions of the Sumerians on stelae, prisms, tablets, pillars, and temple facades, be the stone natural rock or of human manufacture. Later, Babylonia, Akkad, Ugarit, Ebla, Assyria, Mari, Mohenjo-daro, Egypt, and many other cultures left to us today many writings because they had been preserved in stone. Had only wood, parchment, vellum, skins, or some other perishable mediums been employed, our knowledge of the ancient world would be nil. Our idea of a book in these modern times is very different than that of early man. To them, a book was any container of knowledge. A temple room exhibiting 4 walls covered in hieroglyphic text was a book to them, no different than a series of colophon-connected clay tablets in cuneiform telling of the creation of the world. The series of tablets was a book. A man could choose one of the heavily scripted pillars in a temple complex and spend a long time reading the text, just as another man employed attendants who dutifully unfurled an old leather scroll as he patiently read the material. To both men, they were reading books. Quite literally, the pillars of the Sethites were books upon enormous monuments of stone, tiny writings along the lower courses being tantamount to entire editions of modern encyclopedias. These books were left so that people in the future beyond the Great Flood could learn that there was indeed a Creator and that He had a plan. Today we refer to the Scriptures as the Word of God, but where exactly did it come from? There are 12 definitive colophons in the Genesis narrative that demonstrate that at one time the Genesis text was divided between 12 tablets. It will be shown in this book that much of the biblical material found in the scriptures today actually came from the surface writings once adorning the Great Pyramid. That someone after the flood visited Egypt and copied the texts that later found their way onto the pages of our Bibles does in no way infer that they were not inspired writings. On the contrary, if they are Enochian in origin, then they must have been truly inspired. Could the pyramids be an earthly symbol of the eternal Word of God made of permanent stone, an image of the enduring reality of the truths of Scripture? Francis Barris was close to the mark when he wrote, "And in stones the character and images of celestial things are often found. The stones at Giza in the form of the Great Pyramid are stacked upon each other level upon level, reaching slightly over 480 feet, forming the largest book on earth. It is also the oldest. As we will learn throughout this study, not only was the Great Pyramid actually covered in millions of tiny inscriptions studied and copied by the learned of bygone ages, but the architectural designs of the exterior and interior areas of the monuments convey deep spiritual truths hidden for millennia. Another layer of the pillar symbolism must also be explored here. The prophet Isaiah wrote that the pillar in Egypt was a sign and a witness. The use of stones to witness some historical event is virtually timeless. The book of Jasher provides us with one of the best examples. Jacob, later renamed Israel by God, was in love with one of Laban's daughters, and they came to a verbal agreement that he would labor for Laban 7 years to earn her hand in marriage. Jacob fulfilled his word, but Laban did not, and the former agreed to another 7 years, Jacob receiving 2 wives, but only one that he wanted. After 14 years and a conflict between Jacob and Laban in the presence of witnesses, they raised a heap of stones, and Jacob said, "This heap is a witness between me and thee." 40. The site became the famous Gilead. This heap of stones, like a cairn, was a witness to others that Jacob and Laban settled their differences, and it was a reminder that the 2 men had made a covenant binding agreement. The institution of a covenant is integral to understanding the purpose of the pyramid. Also in the book of Jasher, we learn that when Abraham was taking Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice his son at the request of God, Abraham looked from a distance over the land and saw a pillar of fire upon the mountain that extended into the sky, and the glory of God was seen in the cloud. Abraham was astonished and asked the others in the group if they too saw these things, but only Isaac could see them. He deduced from this that the phenomenon was a sign from God that Isaac was an acceptable offering. 41. Fortunately, the act of sacrifice was not God's plan, and Isaac lived and fathered Jacob, but God used the event to establish a covenant between Abraham and all of his future offspring and himself. Thus, the sign of the pillar was the sign of the covenant, the pillar of fire. This was confirmed in Genesis, where at the heap of stones erected by Jacob and Laban, Jacob also took up a stone and set it up for a pillar. 42. Jacob was then told by God to move to Bethel and build an altar. At Bethel, the Lord visited Jacob and renewed the covenant between Abraham's seed and himself. It was then that Jacob underwent a profound transformation, albeit symbolically. His name was changed to Israel. In commemoration of the event, Jacob erected a pillar of stone at Bethel to witness that this covenant was permanent. 43. This pillar of stone was the altar that Jacob built at Bethel, which means house of God, just as in Egypt the pillar pyramid, according to Isaiah, was an altar of God. A pillar and an altar, a covenant and name change. These are the elements to an incredible arcanum involving the identity of the Great Pyramid. Remember them. This was not the first time that Jacob had erected a pillar to commemorate some important event. He had a spectacular vision of a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to the heavens, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. 44. In this vision, the voice of the Lord promised him that he would renew the covenant that he had made with his father and grandfather Abraham. When Jacob awoke in the morning, he was terrified, took the stone he was using for a pillow, and made a pillar because he believed the site was the gate of heaven, saying, "And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house." This association between the pillar and ladder motif is very important, as the ladder is the symbol of ascension. In ancient symbol worship, we learned that in the early history of mankind, the pillar became the universal symbol of the deity. Also, we discover that the artificial hills of stone so commonly found around the world were used to represent the dwelling place of God, serving as a witness to the people that he lived among them. Joshua erected a great stone pillar before the leaders of the tribes of Israel before the conquest of Canaan to show them that their covenant with God was renewed, and King Josiah, almost 800 years later, stood beside a pillar when he made a covenant with the Lord. 46. The pillar as a symbol is a more condensed form of the divine tree, typified by the architectural column. This alludes that there is a hidden meaning in the Genesis record concerning the Edenic paradise, wherein stood 2 trees, one of knowledge and the other of life. The pillar pyramid of the Sethites symbolized the tree of knowledge, for it was covered in the knowledge of the history and science of the old world. Enoch witnessed in vision the three mountains of the blessed land represented in the image of the dismembered tree, which by extension identifies the pillar. But there is yet another layer of the archaic symbolism of the pillar we must explore.